Think about the scariest villains in cinema history. You might picture masked killers lurking in the shadows, or supernatural entities that defy explanation. But what if the most terrifying antagonist in film history isn't human at all? What if it's something you pass on the highway every single day without a second thought? Two of horror's most iconic nightmares aren't creatures or psychopaths. They're trucks. Massive, relentless, seemingly alive machines that turn ordinary roads into death traps. On one side, we have the rusted, weaponized delivery truck driven by an ancient demon that feeds on human flesh. On the other, a grimy tanker piloted by a faceless driver whose motives remain forever unknown. Both have terrorized audiences for decades. Both have become legends in their own right. But if these two mechanical monsters ever met on a dark, empty highway, which one would emerge as the ultimate predator? Before Steven Spielberg became the architect of blockbusters, he directed a television movie in 1971 that would change horror forever. The film was called Duel, and its villain was unlike anything audiences had seen before. The star of this nightmare was a 1955 Peterbilt 281 tanker truck, a beast of American engineering with a split windshield and round headlights that gave it an almost demonic face. This wasn't just any truck. The vehicle bore multiple license plates from different states, a chilling detail suggesting its driver was a serial killer who had murdered across state lines. The genius of Duel lies in what Spielberg chose not to show. Throughout the entire film, the driver's identity remains a mystery. His face is never revealed, his voice never heard. This anonymity transforms the truck itself into the villain, a mechanical predator with its own malevolent intelligence. The Peterbilt wasn't just menacing in appearance. This industrial titan could haul over 30 tons of cargo and reach speeds between 61 and 67 miles per hour, though clever camera work made it appear even faster. Every detail of the truck was designed to unsettle viewers, from the toxic black smoke belching from its exhaust to the rust and grime coating its massive frame. The film's impact was so profound that Stephen King himself listed it as one of the best horror films from 1950 to 1980. What Spielberg understood was primal and terrifying. On the open road, when a massive truck decides to hunt you, there's nowhere to hide. You can't reason with it, you can't fight it, and you certainly can't outrun it. The highway becomes a gladiatorial arena where you're hopelessly outmatched. This wasn't just a movie about road rage. It was about the vulnerability we all feel when we're alone on the highway, miles from help, with something massive and unstoppable bearing down on us. The story behind Duel is almost as fascinating as the film itself. The screenplay was based on a short story by Richard Matheson, who drew inspiration from a real encounter he experienced on November 22, 1963. That personal brush with highway terror became the foundation for something entirely new in cinema. Spielberg shot the entire film in less than 2 weeks with a budget under $500,000, proving that true horror doesn't require elaborate sets or expensive special effects. All you need is a talented director, a talented actor, and a menacing vehicle with a story to tell. The production itself was fraught with danger. During the film's climactic scene where the truck plunges off a cliff, the stunt was completed in a single take. The driver barely managed to jump out at the last moment, when a mechanical malfunction caused the truck to veer off course earlier than planned. That moment of genuine peril translated to the screen, giving the finale an authenticity that choreographed stunts rarely achieve. The original Peterbilt was completely destroyed during filming, and 2 additional trucks had to be created for the theatrical release that followed the TV premiere. Spielberg's direction transformed mundane highway interactions into pulse-pounding terror. Every time the protagonist tried to pass the truck, every time it appeared in his rearview mirror, audiences felt their hearts race. The film taught viewers to fear something they'd never considered threatening before. Passing a truck on the highway, a maneuver most of us perform without thinking, suddenly became loaded with tension and dread. The influence of Duel can be seen throughout Spielberg's later work, including Jaws, where an unseen predator stalks victims in an environment where they're vulnerable. The film also inspired countless imitators, including road rage thrillers, and notably, Jeepers Creepers. But the original remains unmatched in its ability to extract maximum terror from minimal resources. Spielberg proved that sometimes the most frightening monster is the one you can see clearly, the one that exists in the real world, the one that could be waiting for you on your next road trip. 3 decades after Duel terrorized audiences, another truck emerged from the darkness of horror cinema. The Creeper's vehicle is a rusted 1941 Chevrolet COE delivery truck, equipped with a menacing cow catcher welded to its front grille. While Duel's Peterbilt looked like a working truck that had seen better days, the Creeper's Chevy looks like something that crawled out of a junkyard nightmare. Its heavily patinated green finish makes the vehicle appear as ancient and ominous as the creature that drives it. Every inch of the truck, tells a story of decay and malevolence. But the most chilling detail sits on the rear license plate. The vanity plate reads "Beaten Goo," a horrifying play on words that means "be eating you." This isn't just transportation for a monster. It's a mobile hunting platform, a predatory machine designed for one purpose: delivering victims to a demon that feeds on human flesh every 23 years. The Creeper's truck defies logic and physics in ways that make it even more terrifying than its real-world counterpart. Despite its decrepit exterior and obvious age, the vehicle can reach speeds of at least 100 miles per hour, far exceeding what any 1941 truck should be capable of achieving. Director Victor Salva openly admitted in DVD commentary that he's a massive fan of Duel, making the Creeper's truck an intentional homage to Spielberg's masterpiece. The connection between the films is unmistakable, but Jeepers Creepers takes the concept in a darker, more supernatural direction. Where Duel's truck was terrifying because it felt real, the Creeper's truck is frightening because it's clearly something more than metal and machinery. 3 separate trucks were constructed for the first Jeepers Creepers film, though only 2 were actually functional. Each one was carefully weathered and modified to look like it had been prowling back roads for decades, accumulating rust, dents, and the evidence of countless murders. The truck became inseparable from the Creeper himself, an extension of his malevolent will that was just as dangerous as the demon behind the wheel. Here's where the 2 trucks diverged dramatically. The Creeper's vehicle isn't just a mode of transportation. It's a mobile arsenal that would make military engineers jealous. The entire truck is completely bulletproof, with every shot fired at it ricocheting harmlessly back toward attackers. Law enforcement officers empty their magazines into the vehicle with no effect whatsoever. But the real nightmare begins when the Creeper decides to fight back. The truck is heavily booby-trapped with an array of horrifying weapons. Spikes rise from the truck bed to impale pursuing vehicles. Harpoons shoot from the modified tailpipe with deadly accuracy. The Creeper can deploy tracking explosives that chase down fleeing victims. These aren't modifications you can install at your local auto shop. The weapons appear and disappear according to the Creeper's will, suggesting the truck itself might be enchanted or alive in some supernatural way. When the demon gestures, new traps materialize. When he commands, the vehicle responds as if it shares his consciousness. Duel's Peterbilt takes a completely different approach. It has no weapons, no special modifications, no supernatural enhancements. The truck is exactly what it appears to be, a massive industrial vehicle in the hands of someone who wants to kill. At 90 miles per hour, the Peterbilt 281 can impact with a force of at least 3.85 megajoules, enough kinetic energy to demolish a car and everyone inside it. The truck doesn't need harpoons or explosives because its sheer mass is weapon enough. When that much weight is moving at highway speeds, anything in its path gets obliterated. The tanker uses its size to box victims in, to force them off the road, to create situations where escape becomes impossible. It's psychological warfare combined with overwhelming physical advantage. The philosophical difference between these vehicles reveals 2 distinct approaches to horror. The Creeper's truck embraces the supernatural, using impossible weapons and defying the laws of physics to create a threat that feels unstoppable because it literally is. Duel's truck embraces realism, using nothing but size, speed, and a driver's murderous intent to create terror that feels viscerally possible. One asks you to fear magic and demons. The other asks you to fear your fellow man and the machines he controls. Both approaches are equally effective, but they target different primal fears lurking in the human psyche. What makes both of these films so effective isn't just what's on screen. It's what they tap into in our collective unconscious. The use of truck horns as instruments of terror originated with Duel, where train horns were adapted to create attention-grabbing warning signals that announced the Peterbilt's presence. That sound design choice was brilliant, because it took something we hear regularly on highways and transformed it into a harbinger of death. Suddenly, every truck horn becomes potentially threatening. Both films exploit the fundamental vulnerability we experience on the highway. When you're driving, you're enclosed in a thin metal shell traveling at high speeds. You trust that everyone else on the road will follow the rules, maintain their lanes, and respect your right to safe passage. But what happens when someone or something decides not to follow those rules? What happens when a vehicle with 10 times your weight decides you're prey instead of a fellow traveler? The Creeper's truck amplifies this fear by being overtly creepy, with its vandalized, ominous appearance. One look at that rusted death trap tells you something is wrong. But that's almost a mercy, because at least you know to be afraid. Duel's truck is made terrifying precisely because it looks like any other working vehicle, just grimy, oil-stained, and belching toxic smoke. There's no obvious indication that it's dangerous until it starts hunting you, and by then it's too late. Both vehicles undergo a process of anthropomorphization in their respective films. They develop personalities. They seem to think, to plan, to anticipate their victim's moves. The Creeper's truck growls and snarls like a living predator. Duel's Peterbilt seems to toy with its victim, backing off only to return when hope begins to bloom. This transformation of machinery into something alive preys on our deepest fears about technology. We've all had moments where a car or appliance seems to have a mind of its own, where technology appears to rebel against human control. These films take that uneasy feeling and amplify it into pure nightmare fuel. The horror isn't just being chased by something that wants you dead. It's being chased by something that shouldn't be alive, but clearly possesses consciousness, intent, and an overwhelming desire to destroy you. The influence these two trucks have had on cinema cannot be overstated. Duel launched Steven Spielberg's career and achieved international theatrical release after its initial television premiere, proving that a young director with vision could create something extraordinary on a shoestring budget. The film became a masterclass in tension and suspense, studied by film students and dissected by critics for decades. Its influence can be seen in road rage thrillers like Joyride, and continues to be analyzed as a meditation on masculinity, power, and the American relationship with vehicles and open roads. Spielberg took a simple premise and elevated it into something that fundamentally changed how audiences viewed highway travel. After Duel, every long drive contained the possibility of encountering something malevolent. Jeepers Creepers became a franchise despite mixed critical reviews, with the Creepers truck remaining iconic throughout all subsequent installments. The vehicle became merchandise, appearing on t-shirts, model kits, and collectible replicas. Horror fans embraced the truck as a symbol of the franchise, recognizing it as a character in its own right, rather than just a prop. Original screen-used Jeepers Creepers trucks are now owned by collectors and regularly displayed at horror conventions, where fans line up to photograph themselves with the legendary vehicle. The surviving Duel truck, carefully preserved, is now owned by collector Brad Wyke in Lincolnton, North Carolina, where it stands as a monument to practical filmmaking and Spielberg's early genius. Both trucks inspired countless imitators and copycats. Suddenly, every horror film needed a menacing vehicle. Every thriller required a chase scene with oversized machinery. But none of the pretenders ever quite captured the magic of the originals. These two trucks worked because they weren't just visual effects or CGI creations. They were real, physical machines that could actually pursue actors and create genuine tension on set. That authenticity translates to the screen in ways that digital effects simply cannot replicate. Now we reach the ultimate question. If these two mechanical nightmares ever met on a dark, deserted highway, which one would prove superior? Let's examine the technical specifications. The Creepers truck likely features a 383 Chevy crate motor with a supercharger, while Duel's Peterbilt boasts a 260 horsepower Cat 1673B turbocharged engine with a 13-speed transmission. In terms of raw speed, the Creepers truck dominates with its ability to exceed 100 miles per hour compared to the Peterbilt's 67 mile per hour maximum. That speed advantage means the Creeper could choose when to engage and when to retreat, controlling the tempo of any confrontation. But speed isn't everything in a fight between titans. The weapons comparison heavily favors the Creeper's arsenal. Bulletproof armor, spike traps, harpoon launchers, and tracking explosives create a mobile death machine that can attack from multiple angles simultaneously. The Peterbilt has nothing but its mass and momentum. However, that mass shouldn't be underestimated. One solid impact from 30 tons of steel moving at highway speeds would crumple the Creeper's much lighter delivery truck. The question becomes whether the Creeper could land his exotic weapons before the Peterbilt could ram him into oblivion. The psychological component adds another layer to this hypothetical battle. Duel's truck is terrifying because its driver's motivations remain forever unknown. That mystery creates a horror that's hard to quantify. You can't predict what you can't understand. The Creeper, despite being a supernatural entity, has clear motivations. He hunts for food, following predictable patterns tied to his 23-year cycle. In some ways, that makes him less frightening because his behavior can be anticipated. If you encountered both trucks on a lonely highway at midnight, which scenario would be worse? The Creeper's truck announces itself as a threat. Everything about it screams danger, giving you precious seconds to recognize the threat and potentially escape. Duel's Peterbilt could be any truck until it decides you're the target, and by then you're already engaged in a fight for survival with no warning. There's something uniquely terrifying about ordinary things turned malevolent. A demon driving a death truck is scary, but it fits within the realm of supernatural horror where rules don't apply. An everyday truck piloted by someone who simply decided to murder you today, that's a horror that could actually happen, and that possibility makes it infinitely more disturbing. These two vehicles didn't exist in a vacuum. They created an entire subgenre that continues to thrive. Stephen King's Maximum Overdrive from 1986 took vehicular horror to its logical extreme, featuring an entire fleet of trucks that became sentient killers, set to an AC/DC soundtrack that perfectly captured the film's over-the-top energy. King's approach was less subtle than Spielberg's, but no less effective, creating a scenario where all vehicles became threats and nowhere was safe. Joyride introduced Rusty Nail, a truck driver who stalks and terrorizes travelers, using nothing but a CB radio and his massive rig. The film brilliantly updated the Duel formula for a new generation, proving the concept still had plenty of fuel left in the tank. Even international cinema got in on the action with the 1989 Australian film Roadkill, featuring a menacing Freightliner FLC with a button-tuck configuration and murderous intent. These films demonstrated that vehicles could serve as effective antagonists across different cultures and filmmaking styles. The formula was universal because the fear it exploited was universal. Everyone drives or rides in vehicles. Everyone shares roads with massive trucks. Everyone has experienced that moment of unease when a big rig gets too close or behaves unpredictably. Horror trucks tap into that common experience and amplify it into nightmare scenarios. The subgenre also proved that you didn't need complicated plots or elaborate mythology to create effective horror. Take a vehicle, make it menacing, put it in pursuit of sympathetic characters, and let the chase play out. The simplicity of the formula is part of its strength. There's nowhere to hide from a truck on an open highway. There's no reasoning with a driver you can't see or communicate with. There's just you, your vehicle, miles of empty road, and something massive that wants you dead. That purity of concept creates tension that more complex narratives sometimes dilute. These trucks became icons because they represented fears that resonated across audiences and generations. Fears that remain potent today every time we merge onto a highway and check our mirrors. So which truck ultimately reigns supreme? The answer depends entirely on what kind of horror resonates with you most deeply. Duel's Peterbilt represents the horror of the unknown and the everyday. It's a reminder that evil can wear ordinary faces and drive ordinary vehicles. There's no supernatural explanation, no magical solution, just human malevolence amplified by machinery. Spielberg proved that minimalism and psychological warfare could be more effective than any amount of gore or special effects. The film stripped horror down to its essence: a predator, prey, and an environment where help is impossibly far away. That approach created a template that horror filmmakers have been following for over 50 years. Jeepers Creepers took that template and infused it with supernatural elements, showing that the formula still worked when you added demons, magic, and impossible weapons. The Creepers truck demonstrates how adding fantasy elements can refresh a concept without abandoning what made it effective in the first place. It's still a chase, still a massive vehicle hunting smaller prey. But now the stakes include not just death, but consumption by an ancient evil. Both approaches have merit, and both films have earned their place in horror history. The real winners are horror fans who get to experience both nightmares, who can appreciate the subtle terror of Duel and the over-the-top spectacle of Jeepers Creepers. But here's something to consider the next time you're driving alone at night on an empty highway. When you see headlights approaching in your rearview mirror, when you hear the growl of a diesel engine, when a massive truck begins to close the distance between you, remember these films. Remember that sometimes the scariest monsters aren't hiding under beds or lurking in closets. Sometimes they're right there on the road beside you, wrapped in steel and chrome, waiting for the right moment to strike. These trucks didn't just scare us for 90 minutes of runtime. They changed how we perceive highway travel forever, adding a layer of unease to something we do without thinking every single day. That's the mark of truly effective horror. It doesn't stay contained within the film. It follows you out of the theater, into your car, and onto the road where it waits patiently in every shadow, every pair of headlights, every truck that appears just a little too close in your mirror. Sweet dreams, and drive carefully.